So two ways to define inflation. Inflation is a sustained rise in the average price of goods and services. Yeah. The price of the same goods must be rising faster than the average. Some prices may be rising more slowly. Some prices may even be falling. Is that okay? And inflation can also be seen as a fall in the value of money. This means that a fixed amount of money buys less than before, and the purchasing power of money has fallen. So we're saying two ways to define inflation are that the price, yeah, sustained rise in average price, yeah, is the key definition. Is that okay? And then you've got inflation can be positive or negative. So it's negative, it's deflation. Okay, do you want to spell the back? So what is the definition of inflation? Yeah. So if some rising, some falling, you get an average sustained rise in average price level. Inflation can also be seen as a fall in the value of money. So because if you walk into a shop for £10 and the prices are higher, can you buy more or less stuff? What do you think? Like that's right. So purchasing power went down. Yeah. So people are poorer. So the value of money went down. And the purchasing power of money has fallen, so that's bad, yeah, essentially. So that's the problem. Is that okay? So that's essentially, so we've done measuring inflation now. All good. That's fine. So inflation is when average price of goods and services is rising. So it's going to be, so the price level goes up. Sometimes the average price will be falling. This is negative inflation or deflation. Other times the country may experience hyperinflation. So when it rises extremely quickly and the money rapidly loses its value. Rate of inflation is slowing down, e.g. from 64%, it's called disinflation. Prices are still rising but at a slower speed. Okay. So what's going on is that we have three different things to get clear on: inflation, deflation, and then disinflation, and they're all subtly different. Okay. Per capita or so on. It was you're kind of measuring. It was just different measurements of the same concept. Yeah. Yeah. So it's percentage in. That's right. So it's percentage average sustained increase in average price level is the definition. It's okay. So the CGP book will have a sustained increase in average price level. Yeah. That's what it is. And it means that if it's a sustained increase in average price level, people are annoyed because it means prices are going up. That's what it means, yeah. So everywhere, and you're right, you have RPI, CPI, that's how you measure it. But sustained increase in average price level would be the definition. Now, if there's a sustained increase in price level, the so it's like a is inflation always caused by demand? I put it on the next tab. Did it work? Did you get on here? So we'll just go tab by tab, and then it's organized by tab at least for you. So is inflation always caused by an increase in aggregate demand? Tell me what the relevant material, like which topic area of syllabus are we talking about here if this comes up? Mm-hmm. And what are the causes of inflation, like standard textbook stuff, if you're just good? Mm-hmm. You got it. So always drive it from that standard textbook stuff, i.e. link topic, question to topic area, and then drive it from theory. Theory is the stuff we learn in lessons, right? The textbook stuff, yeah. So what you want to do is go, okay, assess the view that inflation is always caused by increase in aggregate demand, right? Standard point. The theory, as we discussed in lessons, as is covered in the CGP book, yeah? So you want to link it back to fundamental economic theory and the topic area straight away, yeah? So it's going to be, so we know we're going to divide it up into cost push. We know we're going to go, so evaluate the view that inflation is always caused by an increase in aggregate demand, right? It's probably easier just to agree with it, probably. So you just go, yes, demand pull. Yeah, I can change the reasoning now. So definitions are nice, but not really crucial. What I would say is this: use definitions to show the examiner you know exactly the topic area. Okay? Because a lot of students write irrelevant stuff. I say it's 10% of students write irrelevant material. 10% of answers are completely irrelevant to the question. So what I would do is in the first sentence, I define the topic area so that the examiner knows you're one of the students who knows what's relevant. So maybe you say something like demand pull inflation is where 80 shifts to the right, cost push inflation is where S shifts to the left. If I read that as an examiner, I go, okay, great. This is not one of those terrible sheets, yeah, straight away, yeah. So the examiner is going to be happier with you, right? And then if you've got a nice diagram, nice change of reasoning, you've explained everything, then they're going to be more convinced of you, yeah. So you've got to remember the examiner's marking you completely anonymously. They don't know anything about you. So so the first sentence is just saying inflation is demand pull. Sorry, the cause of cost push inflation. It's going to be like, yeah, okay. So in your case, you just need to look at the CGP book. Go here. It's like wages is the correct answer, yeah? Wage goes up. So if wages go up, then it's more expensive, yeah? It's going to be inflation. Yeah, that is, yeah. Yeah, so it's going to be, that's right. So let's just cover it together, right? So inflation, should be able to get it quickly. Sorry, just a bit slow getting through this book. Here we are. Okay, so cost push inflation, right? A rise in the wages. Yeah. So a rise in wages means firms' total costs go up. If firms' costs go up, that shifts technically the SRS, but the textbook has it as AS, but that's fine. So that leads to the price rise. So that leads to cost push inflation. So cost push because the firm's cost went up.
Yeah. Could be the same with import costs. Yeah. So if import costs go up, that also shifts the AS to the left. Yeah. That also increases prices. Yeah. Okay. Or rise in taxes. That also shifts the AS to the left. That also raises inflation. Yeah. So rising costs of production mean the
Demand pull inflation is caused by the inflation is caused by demand pull inflation. Yeah. Okay. Therefore, you should explain the consequence, right? Demand pull inflation means price level goes up, PL to PL1. Why do I want? Yeah. And then tell the examiner, therefore, demand pull inflation is, well, inflation is always caused by demand pull inflation. Here we go. Here's an example. Maybe give me an expansionary fiscal policy. What's an example of expansionary fiscal policy? Yeah, you can point to the fact that straight after COVID, when the government lifted the lockdown, UK inflation was around 10%. If it, so, it was around like 20, just before the UK government. Yeah. So, yeah. I think so. My understanding. So the government lifted lockdown. After the government lifted lockdown, there was about few months after, 10% inflation, because you had the combined effect of quite a lot of consumption increase after lockdown lifted. And then you also had all the stimulus still going, like quantitative easing, interest rates being 0.1%, right? Furlough, help out to retail and stuff. Yeah. So the government had to withdraw help out to retail and withdraw furlough, which was contractionary fiscal. And then they also had to raise interest rates up to 5%, 5.25%. And that brought down the inflation. Yeah. But the point is that you could argue that that's an example of once lockdown was lifted, the stimulus policy was creating too much inflation because it got above 10% UK inflation. All happy? Is that right? So if you wanted application, that's what I would do. Then you just do exactly. So you see how you're doing it. You just take your knowledge. If you do it really, really well, you can be the best student. If you just write really, really well, so it's about depth, explaining everything. Why is it a shift? What's consequence of shift? What's multiple effect? Explain the consequence of the diagram. Here's the inflation. Yeah. Then you get the same old thing with monetary policy, right? Yeah. And what's your evaluation going to be? Why would cost push inflation be a counter argument? Yeah, 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 yeah. You got it. Application, Iran war will work. Yeah. So you got, unfortunately, you got this, the war, increasing oil prices, shifting SRS to the left. Yeah. You could use countless cost push inflation examples in the past. Doesn't have to be.
Can you tell me like two costs of inflation? What do you think? Yeah. Sure. What about pensions? Like, why would inflation be bad if I was earning I was on a pension? Okay, so I have to go look at that. But so I can show you now, right? So if you think about so the problem is that if you're on a pension, your savings are eroded. Yeah. So that's an issue. So if I increase the inflation, yeah. Can you explain to me now then? Like the cost of inflation? What do you say? Uh, so yeah, so let's say you've got savings in a bank account, right? If inflation goes up, then the problem is that the amount of stuff you can actually buy with that money goes down. Yeah. You can actually think about fixed incomes as a prerequisite even. So this one even. So fixed incomes is more straightforward. So if you have a fixed income like a pension, like pensioners or benefit recipients, then when inflation goes up, it means your real income goes down. Yeah. So this is because the same amount of normal amount of money buys less actual stuff. So the spending power of the money goes down. Yeah. You have to spend it back in. So what would you say? Yeah. Good. That's correct. Yes, you've got it. Exactly. Good, good, good. Okay. So that's going to be the core, the core point. Okay, good. Then what's the benefit of inflation? If inflation's going up, do I buy now or do I buy later? Do you know?
What's the benefits cost of inflation? What would you say? So what are costs of inflation then? What would you say? Mm-hmm. Mm. It's going to be exports what? Cheaper or more expensive? Mm. Yeah, that's right. Well, wait, no. High inflation means exports are more expensive, right? So look at it here, right? Trade competitiveness. If inflation goes up, competitiveness of exports goes down because they're more expensive, yeah? So imports are relatively cheaper, so consumers shift their expenditure towards them. Domestic export revenues fall. The trade balance therefore goes down, right? X minus M falls. Yeah. And then since X minus M is a component of AD, the trade deterioration shifts AD to the left. Are you happy to explain this one back for me? Uh-huh. So it's going to be that if inflation goes up, that means your exports are more expensive. Also, you can say the level matters, right? So you can say in Zimbabwe, they had massive inflation, right? So it went up to, they had trillions of dollars of Zimbabwean currency, right? And they got to the point where it was outrageous and the value of everyone's money became worthless, right? So the damage depends heavily on the actual level of inflation. So you can say a low stable rate, 2 to 4%,
is normally fine, so it doesn't generate large costs. Low demand pull inflation can even be a net positive, since rising prices stimulate AD and growth. But once inflation becomes high and rampant, it creates severe uncertainty and volatility. Yeah. Is that okay? So hyperinflation eradicates property rights, cash savings become worthless. So in the Zimbabwean case, they issued $100 trillion banknotes. Yeah. And again, their money became worthless. People carrying suitcases of money just to buy groceries. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the famous. Yeah. Do you want to spell it back for me then? So what's hyperinflation? That's right. I'll show you the wheel. You've seen the wheelbarrows of cash, right? Where the guy carries wheelbarrows to go buy bread. Yeah. Have you seen that? Yeah. And then you got the bit. Yeah. So imagine your hard-earned Zimbabwean dollars or your hard-earned Zimbabwean marks, and then they all disappear because of hyperinflation. Yeah. So that was really bad. Is that okay? So what's going to happen if inflation goes up? Yeah, that's right. So everything's more expensive. So what happens to consumption? What happens to AD, do you think? That's good. Lovely, you got it. Great. What about okay, so those are two cons. Pros of inflation. What happens to AD if inflation's high? Yeah. So you could say inflation can boost agro demand, right? So regular price rises encourage firms to produce more output. Yeah. So some inflation also encourages consumers to bring forward purchases, buying now rather than later. Yeah. So you could say before prices rise further, consumers refuse to delay spending when they know prices keep rising. So economic growth therefore stays high under modest predictable inflation than under zero inflation or deflation. Is that okay? So what's going on is that if inflation goes up, then people know that. So if inflation goes up, then it means that people will buy now rather than later. So consumption goes up, so AD goes up. Yep. And then what happens to the macro objectives then? Yeah, yeah. Another pro of inflation. What happens to wages if inflation goes up? Yeah, that's true. But also nominal. What happens to nominal wages? Yeah, so that could be a pro, right? So you could argue about nominal wages going up, right? So you say nominal inflation is usually accompanied by higher nominal wages. Yeah. So which workers experience positively, right? Even when the rise only matches inflation. Worker psychology, right? You could say inflation is usually accompanied by higher nominal wages. Yeah. Which workers experience positively. Pay rises are fair is good news regardless of the real terms outcome. Workers receiving regular nominal increases stay motivated, productive. So what's going on here is that if you have a higher, more productive worker, right? If you have a wage rise, if inflation rises, typically wages go up, and workers like that because they get more money, and people like getting more money. Yeah, so people therefore will spend more and are happier, and therefore there's a psychological benefit for pay rise. Therefore, you have to explain that back to me. Yeah. So if inflation's high, workers then get more money because wages go up, and if workers' wages go up, that's good because workers therefore, yeah, you got it. So therefore, what happens to economic growth? Yeah, good. You got it. Is that okay? Regular pay increases will be more motivated, more productive. Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then if inflation is usually accompanied by higher nominal wages, so workers are positive about it because they like getting pay rises. So it's really easy to give people pay rises, as you say. And you got the real nominal distinction right. That's exactly right. They like pay rises even if the pay rise is lower than inflation. So even if it's a real terms cut. It's really easy to give someone a small rise. That's like psychologically pretty easy, even if it's bad from the perspective of their real terms purchasing power. Okay, but the point is that then on here we've got eval as well, which is going to be cost push versus demand pull, right? So if I take you down here, you can say that cost push inflation comes alongside a recession, right? So this is because when you have cost push inflation, as you drew on the graph, it shifts SRAS which way? That's right. So therefore, that causes a recession. That's worse than demand pull because demand pull inflation comes with growth. Is that right? So demand pull inflation is better than cost push because demand pull comes with growth, whereas cost push comes with recession. You have to explain this one back to me as well. You got it. Good. Evaluate. I guess, yeah. I mean, also the other thing to bear in mind with shocks lowering inflation is that it's actually going to be so supply. So you can also talk about the fact that supply side deflation is usually short lived, yeah. So it's not long term. So it's not likely to cause. I mean, the real con of deflation is deflationary trap, right? But that is only going to come after a long period of deflation, typically. Is that right? Yeah. So supply side deflation is short lived and it's generally positive. Is that right? Yeah. But demand side deflation
yeah, is yeah, there's S positive, yeah. So you could say Japan experienced from 1990s onwards this deflationary spiral, this stagnation for decades, but that's really only happening due to demand side deflation. Supply side deflation is temporary and it's just making everything better. Yeah. So this would be great evaluation in that deflation essay, yeah. In the deflation essay, so AQA, you do have deflation essays as a potential like evaluate whether deflation is bad. You know, I guess try and make the essay more complicated, more interesting than that, but something like that, yeah. Is deflation bad for the economy? Yeah. On the one hand, it's going to be a load of deflationary AD stuff, yeah, mainly Keynesian stuff saying that deflation's terrible. Infamous lost decade in Japan is the data. The intuition is that if prices are going down, what do people do? Save or spend. If prices are falling, that's right. Yeah, they say. And what's happening to the real interest rate? You know, this is a more technical point, but you know what's happening to the real interest rate? Well, Fisher equation, yeah. You got the real interest rate over here is equal to the nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. Yeah. Well, you're great at maths, right? We can figure it out. So we've got real interest rate there is equal to nominal minus inflation. Inflation, I've just called pi inflation. That's pretty standard in university level stuff, yeah. I guess we get, but you have with pi as inflation, yeah? Is that right? So it's going to be real interest rate is equal to nominal inflation rate. Nominal is the amount of like the actual money you get paid by the banks, right? If the bank's offering you 5%, that's the nominal rate. But the real interest rate is always inflation adjusted. In real in economics, in macro language, real is always inflation adjusted. Yeah, is that right? Or like and real means how much actual stuff can you buy? How much output can you buy? Yeah, with your money. Okay. So the problem here is going to be that if you have negative inflation, that means that prices are falling. That means this number is negative. Yeah. So let's put some numbers on this. Let's say you get 5% nominally. So Lloyd's offers you 5%. That's an amazing interest rate from a UK bank. But let's imagine they offer you 5% something. Then you have minus, and then you put in the nominal inflation, like minus 2% because there's not. As unemployment goes down, inflation goes up. This is the trend, right? For some reason, I remember the lecturer at Oxford said the Phillips curve looks like Japan, and then I don't know why that stuck with me because I think. Anyway, maybe it does a little bit. I'm not sure, but yeah. Okay, but then the other way around, you have if inflation goes down, unemployment goes up. Okay, so why is this? Well, it's because of the multiplier effect, sort of Keynesian diagram, right? If we have a high level of growth here, right? So growth like that, right? Then that's going to reduce unemployment, but it's simultaneously going to raise inflation, right? So the problem is that that will create a trade-off between unemployment and inflation, right? So it's going to be that essentially it's just demand side policy that explains the Phillips curve, right? If you have expansionary fiscal policy, that will shift AD to the right, that will cause growth, and that will lower unemployment, but that will simultaneously cause inflation. So it's the trade-off of those two things. Yeah, is going to be what this looks like. Yeah. So the Phillips curve, therefore, is effectively just that trade-off between unemployment and inflation. So we think that there's a necessary trade-off based on the Keynesian LRS. If you want to lower unemployment, which is what you want to do, you'll have to accept higher inflation. That's what we see on the multiplier graph. Yeah. But if you want to have lower inflation, you will have to raise interest rates, and therefore you'll have to cause a contractionary monetary policy, let's say, right, which will have to shift AD this way. So the contractionary monetary policy will go the other way around, right? So like this. So inflation will go down,